we'll get started. All right, so welcome to our second ICD-10-CM coding workshop. We are going to pick up where we left off last week, but this will be our last one for a while until we get back into the coding in a couple of months. Y'all know we're about to start module 156 and 157 and all that, and they are not about coding. We move on to different material, more focusing on insurance, billing, office management, things like that. So that'll be fun. So this is going to be our last coding workshop and probably my last one. Like I said, I had to reschedule last night because the nighttime meetings just are not working out with my family life right now. So, but we will still always have our Thursday Zooms. Now tomorrow's at 3 because I had a scheduling conflict. Tomorrow's at 3, but next week we will resume at 3:30 like normal. I'm sorry that I had to back it up to 3. I know that messes with some of y'all who have to pick up kids. I'm sorry, but tomorrow it was 3:30 wasn't working. So, but let's go on and get into our slideshow. Okay, so this is where we left off last time. Basically just looking at the tabular and how it broke down into the different sections. And we talked about the little red stop sign symbol. We know that means that it needs to be more specific, it needs to indent down. So the first thing I want to talk about today with y'all is one of the first steps when we're coding is to pick out our keywords in our first listed diagnosis, because first listed diagnosis does make a difference when you're coding. You will get claims that will come back if you use a code that cannot be listed as a first diagnosis, and there are some that cannot. And there are some that can only be used as a first listed diagnosis during certain circumstances. So you got to read and you got to pay attention to that stuff. But I wanted to go through a couple of things, a couple of examples on how to pick out those keywords. What, are some common ones that you want to look for and pay attention to when you're reading your scenarios. All right, so looking for keywords. Where do you think you're going to go in the alphabetic index when you have a scenario and they mention abdominal pain? What is the first thing you're going to look for?
Pain.
That is correct. You're going to go to pain, and then it'll start listing it by body part alphabetically, and you will, follow your indentions until you find the one that fits what you need. All right, so number 2, head mass.
Head.
Oh, this one's going to be mass. This one's going to be mass. You generally want to go with whatever the affliction is first, and then the body part second. Okay. Nutritional dwarfism.
Dwarfism.
That is correct. Dwarfism. And I'm guessing because this says nutritional dwarfism that there are several different types, maybe. So that would probably indent down some after dwarfism. All right. So chronic fatigue.
Fatigue.
That is correct. Chronic is kind of like acute. It describes it. It's not really, it's a descriptor. It's either chronic, which is like all the time, or acute, which is hit all of a sudden. So you're going to pick fatigue. And how about chronic pancreatitis?
Pancreatitis.
That is correct. Again, chronic is one of those kind of descriptor words. All right, so let's get into some examples. And this is a little more, might be a little bit more in depth than what y'all have been doing so far. We've got 3 examples that we're going to go through. And this one is established patient with complaints of shortness of breath. Upon examination, the physician determined she needed more aggressive treatment for her current congestive heart failure. They're asking for first listed diagnosis. Your first listed diagnosis is going to be what that patient is there for. Okay. Now, when you read the first sentence, established patient with complaints of shortness of breath, you might think shortness of breath is what she's there for, right? Upon examination, the physician determined she needs more aggressive treatment for her current congestive heart failure. Your first listed diagnosis is actually going to be the heart failure because that's what brought her there. Okay. Your first listed diagnosis is going to be what they are there for. Okay. And sometimes it's going to be a symptom if it's an undiagnosed problem. And sometimes it's going to be a specific problem if it's already been diagnosed. Okay. So for this one, our first listed diagnosis is going to be congestive heart failure. All right. And where do y'all think it wants us to provide the ICD-10 code? So where are you going to start in your alphabetic index?
Failure.
That is correct. Failure. And there's more failure than I thought there was when I looked at the alphabetic index. That's correct. You go to failure and then it starts listing them by body part. You follow the columns until you find heart. And then under there, I want to say there's congestive heart failure. All right, so let's take a look at what this looks like in our manual. All right, so on this side, I have the alphabetic index where you see under failure. It's in the middle column. And then heart. And then if you follow that indentation down, you eventually get to congestive. Right. Yeah, it's all the way down at the bottom. Congestive, I50.9. All right, so that, I know off the top, for those of y'all that are following along, is going to be page 903 in your ICD-10 manual. And this is what that section looks like, okay? It said I50.9. So there it is. And it's kind of surprising me that that one does not have a little red stop sign. So that can be coded as is if it fits. All right, so let's read it. Heart failure, unspecified. Cardiac heart or myocardial failure, not otherwise specified. Congestive heart disease, congestive heart failure, not otherwise specified. And then there's an excludes note for E87.70, but that has nothing to do with us. So we don't have to worry about it. And that's a real short little section to pick from. So it's kind of straightforward. I50.9. It doesn't indent down any under there. It's a real short little section. So it's pretty straightforward. All right. Any questions?
Oh yeah.
What you got?
I might be talking a little weird to my mouth, but
That's fine.
if congestive heart failure not otherwise specified and they have the includes too, are that basically the same thing or that still should be listed as I50.9?
It should still be listed unless the only reason for the excludes, it would say we have fluid overload unrelated to congestive heart failure. That would be her symptom. So we'd have that E87.70, but they do not want you to use it in combination with the I50.9. So if you're coding E87.70, you're not going to code congestive heart failure with it. Okay.
Oh, this is a separate code.
Yeah, it's its own code. You can look E87.70 up and it'll be fluid overload unrelated to congestive heart failure. Yep. It'll be its own diagnosis code. They're just basically saying don't code them together. That's what the excludes is. It means you don't code those two together. And unspecified, when it says not otherwise specified, it just means that you don't have all of this, which there's nothing under here for us to get too much more specific about. Just congestive heart failure. But that's what the NOS is, not otherwise specified. But it just means that there's no more, it's nowhere else in the book. It's not, we don't have any more specifications other than that. It is exactly what it says it is, congestive heart failure. Now, if there were different types or different things, they would probably have an unspecified code, and then they would have a code for those types. But we don't have that in this instance, so it's all just not otherwise specified. Does that help? Yeah? No? All right, I'm gonna go with yeah.
Yeah.
Good deal. Anything else? Any other questions about this one in particular? No?
No, ma'am.
All right. Example number 2. An otherwise healthy patient is seen in the clinic for exposure to tuberculosis. What's our first listed diagnosis? What keyword?
Tuberculosis or exposure to
Exposure. It's going to be exposure because you can be exposed to a lot of different things, right? So we're going to look up exposure, and then alphabetized under that, you'll have all the different diseases and things that you can be exposed to. You'll find tuberculosis. And this one I do not have the pictures of for in the book. But I will tell you this, the code for it is on page 1628 in the tabular, after you find it in the alphabetic index. Anybody found it? Or you want me to give it to you? So I'll give you a hint. It starts with a Z.
One second, I'm gonna look it up, Miss Brandy.
I think Jackie's looking it up too. I think. Yeah, she is. Page 1628. Z.
Z2001,
20.1.
20.1. Yeah.
20.1, that's right. Z 20.1. Exactly, very good. But that's just, failure, exposure, assault. These are all keywords, guys, that can be found in the alphabetic index to get you started on the right path to finding the correct code. All right, so this is going to be the fun one. This one is going to be the our fun one for the day. All right, so a patient presents with a contusion to the left cheek that resulted from a fist fight. Initial encounter. What is our first listed diagnosis? What is this patient here for?
Contusion.
Contusion, but I want to say a fist fight as well.
They're there because of the fist fight, but they're there for the contusion, to get the contusion treated, right? But yeah, they are there because of that fist fight, definitely. But yeah, so the first listed diagnosis is actually going to be contusion to the left cheek. All right, and I'm going to flip on over here. So think if you go to contusion, I want to say it tells you possibly to see something else, maybe injury or assault or something like that. Or does it actually have contusion and then just start listing body parts?
I listing body parts.
Okay. All right. So once you get to the body part, and it looks like, by what I'm looking at in the tabular, it would say like part of the head. Contusion part of the head would be my guess. And that would bring us to this S00.83. Right? But, so here's where the fun begins, y'all. We get to S00.83, and that's on page 1251. For those of you that are following along in your book, in the tabular, 1251. Okay. So that brings us to S00.8, superficial injury of other parts of the head. And then they start listing the diagnosis: unspecified, abrasion, blister, contusion. So that's going to be our one, S00.83, other part of the head. But you see, we have a stop sign. We can't use that code. We got to add more to that, or that's got to be more specific, right? So, but there's nothing underneath it, right? There's nothing indenting down saying that this is going to be different. All right, so whenever, and we see that in front of that little stop sign, there's a little red X. At the bottom of the page in your ICD-10 manual, there's a legend, and it tells you what the little stop sign, the little X, all the little highlighted parts, it tells you what all of that stuff means, okay? And you can see it in the picture down here, in newborn, pediatric, and it goes on and on. But so for us, this X is going to mean add placeholders till it gets to the 7th character. So how many characters do we have? Are we starting off with? S00.83. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters is what we're starting with. So we got to add 2 on there. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go back to the beginning of this subsection and see if there's something that helps us specify initial encounter. Since they said this was the first fist fight that he had been in with the contusion. Okay, so if you go back to S00, see we're in S00.8, you go a few pages back to S00, you will see this little purple box that says A, initial counter, D, subsequent encounters, and S, sequela. Okay, initial encounter is the first time it ever happens. You can only have one initial encounter. Sequela is the second time it happens. Subsequent encounter is each time after that. Okay, so this is our initial encounter. And you'll see right above that box, it says the appropriate 7th character is to be added to each code from category S00. So everything under S00 has got to have either an A, a D, or an S at the end of it to let you know which encounter it was and to get you to that 7th character. All right. But even if we add an A onto the end of that, that still only gives us 6 characters, right? And that's where your X comes in. That's where the X plays the part. Whenever you find out how many characters you've got, whatever you're missing, and y'all have seen some with 3 X's in them. It could be anywhere from 1 to 3 X's in these codes. So your correct code on that is going to be S00.83 X and then A. Okay, the A, D, or S is always going to be on the end. The encounter, which encounter it is always going to be the last character. Okay, and they tell you that the appropriate 7th character. So you're gonna, that X is going to be your 6th character. So S00.83 XA, and that's all 7 characters, and that's as big as it'll ever get. That's maxed out coding right there. It's not going to ever get any bigger than that. So, any questions about that? It's not, y'all, it's not rocket science. But when you first look at it, you're like, what is this crazy nonsense? But a little bit of reading will get you where you need to be. But it's not. You take the code that they have and you add how many ever X's you need. But you always need to check the beginning of this section to make sure that you don't have to add an encounter, which encounter indicator on there. Okay. Always go to the beginning of your section because they may look. S00 also has an excludes. So that means that you do not code any of this stuff with the S00 codes. If you're coding S00 something, you're not going to include these codes here. So it tells you, the book tells you what they need from you. All right, so for this particular example, though, we had a second ICD-10 code, right? Other diagnosis. Here's where more fun comes in. Your other diagnosis is going to be your external cause. This is where you're going to dip into that external cause index, the reason or the how the person got hurt. So this was a fist fight, right? So let's just go ahead and jump to assault because that's essentially what it is. Excuse me, y'all. So if you look up fist fight, I think it tells you see assault or something like that, right? And it'll lead you to your external causes section. And here's something to keep in mind too, guys. When you have 2 diagnoses and one of them is the external cause will never be listed first. Okay? If you have 2 diagnoses, one of them is the external cause, it's automatically going to be the second code that you list. I really don't count y'all wrong if y'all get the order incorrect. If y'all got the 2 right codes, I'm giving you the points. I'm giving you the credit, okay? But know that when you go to work, if you don't put the first listed first, the claim will come back sometimes. Sometimes they don't catch it, but a lot of times they do. They have software that catches it for them, unfortunately. But, so, given what we know, we have a stop sign, we have an X, assault by bodily force. This was a fight. So we're looking at Y04.0,
Yeah.
X A.
brawl or fight. Oh, and let's see, initial encounter. So we have an A at the end of it. But we need 7 characters. Remember, we need 7 characters. So we're looking at Y04.0, then what?
X A.
XXA. That is correct. XXA. You're going to have 2 X's on that one.
Oh, because there's only 4.
Right. Right. You're starting off with just the 4 characters, Y04.0. You know,
Yeah.
you gotta have that A on the end, so you just gotta fill in the middle with X's. Very good, guys. And sometimes you miss the external cause. Sometimes you miss it. That happens. But it's something to watch for. If you know the reason why that the person or the how the person got injured, and you can code it, you should code it. You should code what you know. Never code what you don't know. Never guess. Never assume. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. That's the golden rule. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. So, all right. So any questions about, like I said, this is going to be our last little independent coding workshop for a while, till we get back into it. But y'all have got a really great jump on the material. By the time we get there, well, y'all aren't going to look at it for a couple of months, really. The next couple of months, y'all are not going to look at coding at all. You're going to be studying other things. But you'll pick it right back up, I promise. And then once we get there, we're going to be actually going through it chapter by chapter again, and you'll get all that practice. All that practice. So y'all will have it very, very firm by the time you're done with the program. Y'all are going to be awesome at it. So I'm not concerned. Do y'all have any other questions, concerns about anything, not just ICD-10, anything at all, anything going on with the class, module change, questions about assignments due, anything like that? Final exam, that last lab assignment, that was to y'all or not?
Yes, that okay, so there was the one I don't remember if it was I think it was the lab for the notes.
Mm-hmm.
I have not been keeping up with my notes. So I'm trying to go
That's
back
okay.
and
A great
finish.
source for notes, Sienna, is our PowerPoint presentations that are on
Yeah,
the PowerPoints page. They do a really good job of really highlighting the bullet points. So if you want to make notes off of the PowerPoints, that's usually a really good idea if you haven't been keeping any of your own. The PowerPoints are gold.
yeah, that's what I've been doing, but there's so many slides in the PowerPoints. It's like
Yeah.
it's like last night I was up till like 1:30 taking notes off the PowerPoints. Ugh.
You can also copy and paste. Don't be afraid to copy and paste.
Yeah, but I'm not good at remembering stuff if I copy and paste it. I have to
I
write
know.
it down.
I'm the same way. If I'm gonna remember something, I gotta write it down. And if I don't write it down, I'm not gonna remember it. But you'll do good then if you're taking notes off the PowerPoints, then you'll be just fine. You're gonna get all the information you need to know. Anything else? We good, y'all? All right, y'all. Well, then that's all I've got for you today. I appreciate your time as always. Thank y'all. Let me write down real quick who is here. Just so I know. You said these aren't for grades or anything, guys, but like I said, I do take it into consideration. If y'all need a point or a point away from the difference between an A and a B, and you came to my extra stuff, I'm gonna give you the point, you know? So being here, while not mandatory nor graded, can make a difference. Anna and Miss Tia. All right, ladies. Again, thank y'all so much. Y'all are awesome. And I will see y'all tomorrow at 3 for Zoom, if y'all can make it.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.